Hey everybody, Scott Detweiler here, back with another action-packed episode of Couch to Photoshop. And today we are going to learn probably the single most powerful concept in all of Photoshop, and that is masks. You're going to use masks from now and on into the future. It is something you can do to a limited capacity inside of Lightroom and Capture One if you're into that program, but not to the extent you can do it in Photoshop. So if you are going to want to make composites someday or combine multiple images together, replace skies, do things along that lines, you must learn masks. It is by far and away the biggest tool you're going to use in your tool set. So we're going to learn that. Now, in order to teach you that, I also have to teach you how to use brushes. And unfortunately, brushes itself is a huge project. There's so much to be learned there. So I'm going to do this a little non-traditionally. I'm going to teach you how to use brushes at kind of a rudimentary level, enough to get you past, and then teach you how to use masks also at kind of a beginner level, so that you can use masks confidently. Then we're going to revisit those two things later in other episodes after we get past some beginner stuff. There's a lot you can do as a photographer with what we're going to learn today, and by the end of the fourth episode, you should be able to do some pretty dramatic changes to your imagery without having to get into the more advanced versions of these tools. Although I'm not going to stop. We're going to keep going, and see how far we can get. But by the end of the fourth episode, I really like to have you confident with being able to change some things. So without further ado, let's dive into masks. So in order to learn to mask, we're going to have to learn about brushes. And brushes have some things that you need to learn. So what I'm going to do is create a new layer, and that's the this icon down here. And there's other ways to create new layers with keyboard shortcuts, but I will tell you that 9 times out of 10, just going down and clicking this icon is good enough, because you're not going to create new layers from scratch often. It's actually a process that doesn't come up too often, because most of the time you're going to be working on something like an adjustment layer or something else. So feel free to click that icon. There's a keyboard shortcut for it, but I'm not going to force you to learn that one. So I'm going to do is make my brush bigger, and there's a few ways to do that. You can use the bracket keys. Those are above the enter key on your keyboard, and either the small bracket or the big bracket makes this bigger. This is pretty typical, and you see a lot of people using these. This is super inefficient, but it works. The other way you can do it is to right click, and it will bring up all the brushes that you have available, and then a size. So if you kind of hover off the menu, you see the size of that circle, and you can change that and then go back. You can see kind of the size of the circle you're drawing. This is also kind of inefficient. And then the hardness. This is how hard that edge is. You can see here with the hard round brush, how crisp that edge is versus the soft round brush. The transition from where the brush is solid to where the brush is gone is spread out over a distance, and then that's what this hardness is. So a 50% hard brush should make kind of a spot with some blurry edges, where a very soft brush with zero hardness would look like that, and a very hard brush would look like this. These brushes are all technically the same size, but the transition, the blurry area, is spread out further in the middle one. So these are all the same size brush. Now that's all great and cool and whatever, but how do we do this efficiently? The way I want you to learn to do it is, and it's a little bit different from the Mac to the PC, is being able to use your mouse and your keyboard. So on the PC, and I'm a PC person, as you can tell here, I'm going to Alt, right click, and you can see that I can move my brush to be smaller or larger by scrubbing the mouse from side to side. I can adjust the hardness by moving it up and down. Now, your brush may not appear as mine does if you do not have your video card, if you don't have like a higher end video card. I also play a lot of video games, so I have a very nice video card in here, so I get to see the brush preview. But regardless, you'll still see the statistics for hardness and size next to the brush, even if it's just showing you a circle. Now, if you're on a Mac, you're going to use the Alt and Option keys. They're next to each other. I believe it's the Alt and Option key. I have to say that I'm not an astute Mac user, but they're right next to each other, and you're going to left click, and it's the same operation. It's going to look exactly the same. Up and down for adjusting hardness, right and left for adjusting size. You're going to use this forever. Get used to it. It's just something you got to know how to do. And then you just hold down your left button to paint. And we're painting on a separate layer. We're not wrecking our lovely shoreline here. And then anytime we want to switch our foreground and background color, that's what these are over here. So it's our foreground color and our background color. We are going to only be using black and white for now. And that's good enough for what we need to do. And I think you'll find that you don't use much else than black and white for quite a while until we get into some of the more advanced things. And it'll make sense in a moment. Now there's a couple keys here that are handy to know. The first one is this little switch here, which switches the white and the black. You can only draw with one color at a time, and you will draw with the one that's on top. In this case, it's the white one, and the background is the black. So they call it the foreground and the background color. But the word background is kind of misleading because it isn't the background of anything. It's just the color that's behind the other one. You can hit your X key to flip them. And now I'm drawing with black instead of white. So you basically have two colors readily available to you, and you can load them as foreground and background. By the way, if you did want to play with color, you just double click on the swatch or click on the swatch, and you can come up and you can change whatever you want to change here. So that's how you would do those. So X is a key we're going to use often, and you're going to see me using it all the time. So X, X, X just switches those. Now, if you ever get into a situation where you have a weird color loaded, like say this, and I hit X, and I'm going to replace this one with a blue, and you're like, I need to reset those to black and white. There's a really easy way to do it. You hit D for default, and that's what this icon is right here. So if you don't want to remember the keyboard shortcut, which you do, you just hit D, and it will change it to black and white, and you're back to where you need to be. So that's out of the way. And I want you to practice that for a bit. So you hit B for brush. It's B, very simple. And then you would start painting. You can change your brush size by scrubbing side to side or up and down for hardness. And then you will just switch by hitting your X key on your keyboard to change to black and white. Okay, so I'm painting in a separate layer. So if I hit V for move, you can see I can move this whole thing around because it's like a sheet of glass, right? We talked about this in the past where it's kind of like a sheet of glass, and I've just spray painted stuff on it, and I can move this piece of glass around anywhere I want. It's unrelated to the layer underneath. They are not connected in any way. But what if I want to be able to see through this? Like, what if I painted over a part and I didn't mean to? How do I fix that? And you basically have a couple of methods for doing that. The main one you'll see a lot of beginners use is the eraser tool, and that's E for eraser, and it allows you to set, again, very similar to the brush, you can set its size and so on, and you can just basically erase. And this may seem like it's awesome, and you know, it is. I mean, it does what you need to do. And if we V for moving again, you can see that we cut right through that, and now we can see the lovely shoreline behind here. I'm going to hit undo, which is Control Z a few times. You can do that up here as well under this. Undo whatever your last operation was. But I'm going to teach you just learn it. Control Z. It's not that hard. It's pretty much the same in every other application anyway. So what does a mask do? Why is a mask beneficial? So what a mask does, and you can add a mask to any layer by going down and clicking on the mask button. And it's this one right here. And it's just says add layer mask. So you click on that and it's going to add, oops, I hit it a couple times, by the way, there accidentally, and it added more than one. I will tell you to get rid of the last one if you do this. So if you click on it, it's going to bring up this little dialog. You can hit this trash can, or you can right click and hit delete vector mask. A vector mask is a different creature we're going to talk about later. But you can also do the same thing here. If you create a mask and you didn't mean to, you can right click and hit delete layer mask. So you can always get back to just having the layer. This property dialog will pop up from time to time, and that's a good thing. So it's okay if it pops up. It's going to tell you there's some settings available for whatever you just did. That's good. And I just kind of let it float in here. It'll go away when we want it to. So I'm going to go ahead and hit mask again, but I'm going to hit it once instead of twice. And it brings up this white rectangle. And the white rectangle is hidden from us. It's there and it has a job, but we don't need to be aware of it all the time. So what it does is it is showing us that it is going to reveal everything on that layer, which was how it was before it came into existence. So nothing changed. And the limerick to remember with a mask is white reveals and black conceals. So if I click on the mask, and by the way, you have to click on the mask first. If you're still on your picture, and you hit B for brush and you start painting away, you're actually painting on the layer. We want to paint on the mask. So I'm going to go and click on the mask. Now, remember, black conceals. So if I start painting with the black brush, you're going to see that I am able to reveal what is underneath this layer. Now, conversely, if I change to white by hitting X to change my brush to white and I start painting, I can now reveal what's on that layer. So this allows me to sit and take my time to kind of sketch out something that maybe I'm looking for. And if I take too much, I can just switch it back to black and move it around and kind of just, get to what I'm looking for without having to be perfect right away. If you did this with an eraser, you'd be in a hard place, because if you erase too much, you wouldn't be able to fix it, and that might drive you a little batty. So it's really nice to be able to just kind of erase what you want and then hit X to go back and kind of maybe make some adjustments that way. Now, this is a really, obviously, rough example, and we're going to do a really good example here in just a minute, but I wanted to make sure you understand the concept. The mask is not erasing anything. It is simply either revealing or concealing what is on the same layer. So this is the artwork. This is the mask. Now, if you want to see the mask, you can actually Alt or Option click on it, and it'll show you what the mask looks like. And we're going to show how this is handy in a moment here. One other thing I want to cover is there's this little chain link that appears between the two, between the mask and the layer. This makes sure, I'm going to hit V, or the move key here, that when they move together. But this does not have to be the case. I can disconnect these two things, and I can move the mask, which allows me to see through different things, or I can move the layer, which allows the mask to stay in place. So either one is available to us, but when that is linked, then they will always move together. So you can just simply click on it or unclick, and it'll be there if you need it. But that's what that does, is it holds those two things together. And most of the time, you're probably going to leave it like that. But if you need to, you can disconnect it. Okay, so let's do something cool with this new technology here and use it in an example. So this shoreline that I had made here, by the way, I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to delete it by dragging it down into the trash can. If you were to simply delete it, sometimes you'll get a warning that is only deleting the layer mask, for example, and not the layer. So if we just drag it down in the trash can, you don't worry about that. Just in case that warning ever pops up and you wonder why. So in this case, I've loaded a bunch of images here of this shoreline, and I'm going to turn off a bunch of them. There's a couple ways to do that. You can click and drag and then let off, and it will turn off all those other layers. And to turn them back on, you click and drag up, and it turns them on. That's time consuming, so there's a quicker way. And then it's to hold on the Alt or Option key and click on the eyeball of the layer you want to see, and we'll turn everything else off. And then conversely, just Alt or Option to turn everything back on. So very simple, but powerful. And we're going to use it a lot. So again, get used to that one. And it would be really helpful if you have an image open while we're working through this stuff so you can actually practice it. So I'm encouraging you to do that right now. Now, I've sloppily aligned these things. I did not use a tripod, so they're all over the place. So I'm just going to turn off a bunch of them, and then we're going to go to this first one here. So I'm just going to look at it by turning the eyeball on, and I'm going to turn the eyeball on and off and just kind of look at my picture. And it looks like this wave here is pretty cool. And I wish that wave were in this base picture here. So let's make that happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to put a mask on it. Now, right away, the mask is white, which means it's revealing everything that's on this layer, which means I have to take everything and paint black over the whole thing. And there's a couple ways to do that, but they're all inefficient. There's a fast way to do that. If you know the mask is going to be mostly black, start out with a black mask. So I'm going to hit Control Z to undo. And now when I go down to click on this mask button, I'm going to hold down the Alt or Option key. And then when I click on it, it will create a black version of the mask instead of the white version. So that whole layer is hidden from me. So if you see I turn the eye on and off, nothing changed because the mask is hiding everything. So with the mask selected, remember, select the mask first because you will draw on your picture. I still do it. So you're going to do it. It's okay. There's undos for that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my brush a bit bigger by holding Alt, right-clicking, And I would like a softer brush, so I'm going to move it up. So I got what I want without having to use any goofy keyboard shortcuts. And by the way, I'm using my brush at 100% opacity. You can change that if you want, but I tend to work at 100% opacity for most things, just as a point of reference. So I'm just going to start painting in here. And I'm not really following any, say, guideline or rule for how I want to do this. I'm just painting it to see what looks good. So that looks pretty good. All right, so now this rock got kind of covered, and I don't know that I like that being kind of foggy from how it appears so far. So I'm going to hit X on my keyboard to change this to black. I'm going to go back, and I'm going to kind of paint over that rock a bit. So now I can see this wave here, and it's the only thing. So if I hit V for Move Tool, it's the only thing that I have from that previous layer that is allowed to be shown. It's the only thing that's masked. So if I Alt-click on the mask, you can see what the mask looks like. And you see there's a little bit of a black spot here. I was a little sloppy when I did my brush work. So I'm going to hit B for brush, and I can paint in black and white right on my mask. So I can just go ahead and paint with white or black in here. Now, in this example, it's not obvious what I'm painting or not painting, but it allows me to go and actually view it that way. So I'm going to kind of, I like the crispiness of this, but I don't want that rock covered. So I'm just going to kind of do my best here. And you may be thinking to yourself, wow, that's like kind of subjective, and does that look good or whatever? People will not notice these types of changes. It's amazing what you can get away with if a person doesn't see the before and after for what you're doing. Now note that my brush is kind of small, so it's kind of obvious where my mask is starting and stopping. So in a lot of cases, I like to make my mask bigger and fade in effect over a longer range. I just hit X on my keyboard because I didn't like that. So I tend to find that the brush is bigger, you can kind of get away with more than if your brush is small and hard, by the way. A hard brush leaves an edge, and that's kind of hard to cover up. So you'll find that a bigger, smaller brush is nice for transitioning masks. So my mask looks like this. And you see there's kind of some slop over here, so I'm going to hit X to bring black, and I'm just going to paint over that train wreck I made there. And then you can click on the mask, or you can just Alt-click on the layer again. Okay, so let's do it again. So let's go find this one. What's in this layer that's interesting? Anything? Some of this, maybe some of this, but I don't know if I like it. So I'm just going to drag that down to the trash. What about this layer? I like this. There's a little bit of a splash over here. That's kind of nice. And yeah, that's about it. Otherwise, some of these other things might interfere. Like I really like this wave, but it's right in the middle of our other wave. So we could try it. I mean, it doesn't hurt anything, because remember, we're not destroying anything. The mask is non-destructive. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the mask, and I'm going to do this again by holding an Alt or Option, because I know most of that I'm not going to want to see. I'm going to hit X to turn it to white, and I'm going to start to paint on the mask. And we just kind of find what we're looking for. So let's say, how's that look? And I'm lucky here because waves are pretty organic looking, that I can get away with, smearing these together and it looks legit. And I'm going to turn this on and off to see what I've done. Again, if I want to see just this layer and what I'm doing, Alt-click on it, you'll see it displayed with the checkerboard, which means nothing in Photoshop. So now I can actually paint on this, and all I'm doing is painting on my mask still, but I'm seeing that direct effect inside of Photoshop and how it's using that mask. So if I Alt-click on the mask, this is the mask. So that's what we've done. Another way to kind of visualize what you're doing. So if I look at this, you can see that's the piece I was working on. And there's no reason I can't move this thing, by the way. I mean, it's my picture. So if I like it better over here, I pick it up and I move it. That's the part of compositing that makes this powerful. And that's it. Now, let's say, for instance, that I like, oh, there's something else in this picture that I liked, but I don't remember what it was. I don't remember what that mask looked like without the mask on it. You can just actually shift-click, and it will turn the mask off, and you shift-click to turn it back on. So I kind of like the spill that was in here. So I'm going to hit B for brush. I'm painting with white, and I'm painting on my mask, and I can kind of paint that in. And you see I did an amazingly terrible job of aligning the layers in here, but for our demonstration, we don't care. And let's do one more. And I don't like that one. I'm going to hit delete on that one. How about this one? This one is this cool wave back here. So I'm going to, again, create a mask on this, but I'm going to do it by holding an Alt or Option. There's another way to do it, by the way. If you click and create the mask and you want to invert the mask, it's Control or Command I is invert. You're going to use that one a lot. If you don't remember to make your mask the right direction, you may choose to invert it at a later time. Painting with white on the mask. If you paint on this and you're painting and you're like, I don't see anything, I must have done something wrong, and then you turn your mask off, you see we painted right on the canvas. So, oops, that's bad. You got to Control Z to get out of that. And then we'll go back and make sure, now let's paint on our mask. So there we go, paint a little white so that we see something. And maybe I want to see more of these waves in here and just kind of blend all this together because I like the way it looks. Again, it's your art. You do what you want to do, right? And let's do one more. That wave that's right in the middle there. So again, clicking on it, making sure it's selected, Alt clicking on the mask, and then painting with white. I'm going to hit X, and then we can paint with white. Kind of bring all that together. And I'm kind of just searching the picture out as I paint it in, because if I don't like it, I just hit X and unpaint the part that I don't like. So until we are happy. So there you go. That's the first masking experiment we've done. And there will be many, many, many more. So next time, we're actually going to start with adjustment layers, which are the parts that will really kind of allow you to take and modify this extreme to the extreme level, but without affecting the entire image, because you now know about masks. So practice your masks, put one layer on top of another layer and trying to use the mask to see through it and understanding the concealing and revealing aspect of masks. And let me know if you have any questions. Pop them in the comments below and we'll address them with the next video. If you like this video, please click the like button. It makes other people able to see it and motivates me to make more videos and make them quicker. So that really helps me out a lot. Of course, if you like the videos, feel free to subscribe, and I will catch you all next time.